Welcome back to Conversations with Conscious Rebels. And today we're going to be talking about storytelling and the importance of storytelling and how that relates to my publishing company, Influence Publishing. In the last year, in my conversations with Conscious Rebels, I have gone from helping people publish books to helping people tell their sacred stories. And there is a big difference in that. I have seen the evolution of my publishing company from a 3D publishing company where basically a book is a product to the 5D evolution, which is a book is actually a sacred contract with our soul contract, and our stories lead to our soul contract. It's a different way of looking at books, and it's a way that I want to help people to understand that a book isn't just a book, and your story is not just random. So here's my approach to stories and to books. We are all encoded with soul contracts, and our story is our medicine. It is the medicine that helps us to understand what our soul contract is, what our purpose is, our experience in life, the things that we experience, the things that we go through, the traumas that we go through, the lessons that we learn. This is all part of our soul contract. And unless you actually spend the time to really delve into your story and understand the meaning of your story, then we could just carry on with life thinking that our story is just a never-ending story with no significance. But if you actually take the time to explore your story and to follow the breadcrumbs, then you'll understand that your story has much significance and it is definitely not random. For example, when I think about my own personal story and I think about traveling around the world, and I think, how does that relate to what I'm doing right now? What my sole purpose is to help other people look at their story as medicine. So if I look at my own personal story as medicine, then what I would look at is, why did I travel around the world for 7 years? What was the significance of that? And what did I learn from that? And how did that end up being my medicine for what I do today? Well, traveling around the world, as I said in my previous episodes, really helped me to look at life from a very different perspective, learning from different cultures and learning different ways of life, and actually really helping me to understand what my values are. So therefore, this is the case for everybody. You might look at your story and think, well, I've been a parent for 30 years. What is my soul contract when all I've been doing for 30 years is being a parent? Well, that story in itself and what that means is you being a parent might just be, again, another clue to your soul contract. I've learned from so many of the authors that I've published over the last 17 years that your story really does lead to ultimately your soul purpose. And you might not be that far along your journey now, so you might still be in the story. And that's where your book really comes into play, because it helps you to get clarity and to really understand, well, where to next? What events have happened to me so far that have pointed to my soul contract? So again, if we really look at our stories, and maybe you've had a particular trauma. I look at all of my stories that I've had, and I understand that they almost make me an expert on so many topics because I've had so many different experiences. But all of those experiences led me to the point where I can help other people with their stories. I can relate to them because of all the experiences that I've personally had with chronic pain, for example. So I've worked with a lot of people that have also had chronic pain, and what did that chronic pain teach them? Or what was their health challenge, and what did they do to look at their health condition in a different way? And now they can help other people to do the same thing. I've worked with several people that have had paralysis, and I can obviously relate to them because I've also been in that situation myself. And so, how have they looked at their condition of paralysis in terms of how can their experience now help other people, and how can their experience really point towards what their purpose might be by helping other people in similar situations? Um, I've worked with many holistic healers, and again, their own personal stories helped them to discover holistic healing. And therefore, once they went through that journey, they then became a holistic healer themselves and realized that ultimately that body experience that they had was so that they could really completely dive into that topic in a very detailed way. I'm trying to think of the word that I really wanted to find to explain when you are living the story yourself. When you're living the story yourself, you can help other people because you're living that story. And so you can say, okay, you're so far along this journey, and I'm a bit further along this journey, so I can help you in this way. But until we take the time to actually explore our stories, we just think that those stories are just things that happen to us and they're not that extraordinary. But if you start to look at those clues and really understand that everything that happened to us on our journey, they're all clues, and they're all really a portal for our soul contract. And so, what I really help with people when I help them publish their book is, first of all, I help you to realize that a book is not just a product. It is not a product at all. It's a soul contract, and it is a portal to your soul contract. And so that's where the evolution of my publishing company has really gone to that place where I am really holding a space for people to explore what their soul purpose is by exploring their story. And I help you do that. I help you pull out that story. I guess you could call me a midwife. I'm a midwife to give birth to your story. I am, some people have called me a book doula because I'm helping you give birth to your book or give birth to your story. So, okay, so how do we embrace your story as medicine? You know, when you consider that everything that's happened in your life is effectively medicine for you. We have those experiences to teach us and to help us understand. So therefore, it is our medicine. It's, for example, my own personal journey with scoliosis. As I said in my first episode, my story is that I was out of alignment, but my body being out of alignment was not just my body, it was a metaphor for my whole life that was out of alignment. So our bodies talk to us, and all of those things that happen to us, all of those health events that happen to us, they all have a significant meaning, and they all point to that soul contract. So I help you put those pieces together. They may seem very random to you, but when you work with me, I help you to join those events together and to help you understand why one event led to another event, which ultimately led to you finding your soul purpose. And so that's where I come in as that story doula or that midwife to help you give birth to that story. It might not be the way that you think that you're going to write your story. I might pick up on a topic that perhaps you hadn't even considered, and then that led to you understanding that ultimately that is your purpose and that's what you should be working on. It's just that you've gone down another path and hadn't considered that part of your story. So that's where I really help you to explore those other parts of your story. Okay, so think of this as a portal to your soul purpose. And me helping you with your story helps you to look at that portal in a more focused way and to get clarity on that journey. You know, I never considered myself, somebody that would be a writer and certainly not somebody that would be a book publisher. And I never even considered, when I left England 25 years ago, that I would end up being a book publisher and helping people tell their stories. But if you look at everything that happened in my life, I went traveling around the world. That 7-year journey around the world really was about learning about values, learning about other cultures, but it was also my invitation to write that story. That was my invitation to start writing. My grandma, she gave me back the letters that I had written to her, and she said, now go write that book. So that to me was my invitation to explore writing and to explore book publishing. And ultimately, that is what led to my purpose of helping other people to do that. So I never set out to have this as my vocation, to have this as my sole purpose. But if I hadn't have gone traveling around the world for 7 years, I wouldn't have written those letters and I wouldn't have had her inspire me to actually write a book. So that's my story. That was my portal to do what I now do, which is inspire other people to share their stories in a book. So that gives you just a small example of how we don't think, you can't immediately connect those two things, that traveling around the world would ultimately lead to me being a book publisher or inspiring other people with their stories. So I help you make that kind of connection when I help you in those sacred story sessions that we have together. So it's a real deep dive into your story. As I say, I don't think of a book as a product. I think of it as a portal to your soul contract. And the sessions that we have together do exactly that. I help you make those connections that aren't necessarily that clear to you because you're in the story. And so you don't see those connections that I will see when I ask you sometimes difficult questions. Sometimes I will ask you difficult questions that you have to answer in a very vulnerable way. And when you're answering things in a very vulnerable way, I'm giving you a safe container to be able to do that. I'm basically holding up a mirror. I'm holding up a mirror for you so that you can look at yourself and reflect on your story. And then those difficult questions I'm going to ask you are going to encourage you to delve into that story a little bit deeper than you maybe thought that you would do. I've had so many people that have come to me and they say, "Oh, I'm going to write a book," or "I'm halfway through writing my book. I'm halfway through writing my manuscript," and I say, "Okay, why are you writing your book?" And they may say, oh, because I want to become rich and famous, or because I want people to know what I do, or because I want it to be a business card, um, or maybe it's just because they want to leave a legacy or they want to share their story. So I start by asking those questions. Why? Really, why do you want to share your story? Is it because you want to help other people? Or is it because your ego wants to just showcase you and your story? Can you see that they're two very different things? And so when I sometimes ask those difficult questions, then it means that we're not meant to be working together. Because if somebody says to me, well, I have a very interesting story, so I want to share my story because it would make a good movie. You know, I can't tell you how many times people have told me that. I want to share my story because it would make a good movie. My story needs to be made into a movie. Okay, but why? Why does your story have to be made into a movie? And what is it exactly about your story that would make a good movie? And who is going to watch that movie and how is it going to help them? So I'm really challenge people to look at their story and ask that why question. And I spend a lot of time on that why question. And one of the reasons I do that is because writing a book is not easy. It's a big commitment and it takes a lot of time. And our coaching sessions that we do together will be maybe 3 months, maybe 6 months. I have some clients that I've worked with for more than 12 months. I have some clients that I've worked with for 2 years because they are living the story and I'm helping them find the clarity to live that story. There is no timeline when it comes to a soul contract. You cannot say, I want to publish my book in 3 months, because once we start working on the portal, maybe you will discover that there's so much more, there's so much more time to go before your story is finished. Is your story ever really finished? Probably not. And I think that's one of the other mistakes that people make is they think of their book as a closed book, you know. Oh, I can't write my book because the story's not finished yet. I don't think the story's ever going to be finished. The story probably won't be finished until the day you die. And so you really have to think about your book as a slice of life, a slice of life that helps other people through their challenges and points to your own soul contract. And so that's the way that you need to look at your book. And that's the way I reframe it for people when I work on the story sessions with people. Okay. So think of it as you're embodying the frequency of the future you. That's what the purpose of your book is to embody the frequency of the future you. And what is it that you are going to be doing in the future as your soul contract? Let me give you a few examples so you can understand how I've really changed their life because they have embodied their story. For example, I worked with a lady who she inspired me so much in my own personal journey because her story was about her husband who actually committed suicide in a pretty spectacular way. He actually shot his brains out in his son's bedroom. It was a defiant act of emotional abuse. And I didn't even know that there was such a thing as emotional abuse. You know, we all hear about abuse in relationships. We hear often about verbal abuse as well as physical abuse. But I had never come across that terminology of emotional abuse before. And as she was telling me her story, I realized that I too was in an emotional abusive relationship. And, as she was sharing her story, I said to her, like, I don't think many people know about this. And I have personally spoken to many people that are in relationships like I was in. And, you hear the truth that it rings. One of the things that she said to me was, my husband was always threatening me that if I left him, he would commit suicide. And I remember when she said that, it hit me really hard because I thought, I've heard that quite a few times from not just my own personal relationships, but I've heard other people say that. And I've also heard it within my family. So that taught me to look at that situation in a different way and to say, wow, more people need to understand about emotional abuse. And she realized through our process of writing this book that really that's what her soul contract was, that she had to go through that process and witnessing her husband shooting his brains out in their son's bedroom so that she could warn other people about emotional abuse so that wouldn't get to the point where their relationship had got to. And think about the damage on their son. He was so emotionally abusive that it was more important to him to prove a point than to think about what was the impact that would have on their son. And so that story of emotional abuse led to her doing speaking engagements, going on to podcasts, going and creating membership sites so that she held a container for other women that were in emotional abusive relationships. And she became an expert on that topic. And that was her soul contract. Her soul contract was to be that mentor to other women. And as it turned out, she became the mentor to me as well, because it was really the catalyst for me to leave my husband because I realized that I was in an emotionally abusive relationship. And once I did that and once I left that relationship, I blossomed into my own person and didn't quite realize how much that was keeping me small. I have so many stories like that. I've published over 300 authors in the last 17 years, and all of those stories have really inspired me. I've helped so many people to step into their true soul purpose, their soul contract, by really embodying their stories. And I've changed many people, their life, the way that they look at their life. I've had a lot of people that have moved to Mexico. They've left their husbands, they've left their careers, they've left their safe, comfortable lives to step into their true purpose. And it was working with me on those storytelling, deep dive sessions that led them to really looking at their life and going, okay, maybe I need to change my life. My story isn't finished. I need to move forward to really embrace my story to help other people. So that's really what I do. A book is not a product. A book is your portal to your soul contract. And that's really why this evolution of my own journey as a conscious rebel is to help other people to really step out of their comfortable place, to look beyond the lines, to really challenge the status quo, to look at their own story as a portal for their soul contract, and to give them guidance to be quietly and gracefully disrupting their lives and their stories. And that's really what I do. And that's why I'm also hosting this podcast show as a portal for people to really gracefully disrupt the way that you look at life. Those conversations with those rebels, with those conscious rebels, will end up being many books that I publish. And so I invite you into that conversation, and I invite you to look at your book or so thank you for joining me again. And in the next episode, I'm going to talk about some of the objections that people give me about sharing their story, and why it's difficult for them to be vulnerable, and why it's difficult for them to even write their story. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about my dyslexia, and that I am probably the world's only dyslexic book publisher. And that is pretty rebellious. It's a pretty rebellious statement to make. And I'll be explaining in the next episode why why it's a good thing to be a dyslexic publisher, and how I can inspire other people by really taking that stand and showing people sharing your story and writing a book is not just about being actually, it's not at all about being a good writer. It's nothing to do with being a good writer. It's all about being a good storyteller. And I help you to tell that story. So until next time, thank you again for joining me. And I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next episode. Thank you.